A lot of stories get written. Some are true, some are exaggerated, and some, well, let's just say they stretch the definition of journalism. But recently there was one headline that even made me stop and think. Elon Musk returns to the White House. Now, whether you believe that phrase is symbolic, strategic, or just overblown media hype depends entirely on how you interpret the events leading up to it. Because if you zoom out, you start to notice a pattern: reports about political tension, reconciliation rumors, donor networks, even dramatic statements about getting forced out of D.C. because of getting too close to the truth. And suddenly, a simple dinner starts looking a lot less simple. So today, I want to walk you through how other people have reported these events, what analysts say it means, and why the story of the supposed return is bigger than one evening at the White House. We'll look at the public information, interpret the possibilities, and let you decide for yourself what's really happening. Let's start with the moment that set off the headlines. When photos emerged at the White House state dinner, shaking hands with the president, appearing cordial again after months of what the press loved to call a brutal feud. The headlines practically wrote themselves: bromance renewed, alliance restored, Musk back in Trump's good graces. Now, I'm not here to confirm or deny anyone's intentions. I'm simply analyzing how this looked from the outside, because every public moment has a backstory, or at least theories about one. And in Washington, theories have a way of becoming their own reality. The dinner itself was a state event with the Saudi crown prince. High-profile guests, black tie formality, the kind of occasion that sends signals whether you want it to or not. Political observers immediately noted the optics. Two billionaires who'd spent the summer trading sharp words on social media were suddenly smiling together again. But here's what people tend to forget. Disagreement with Trump happened before, very publicly, and analysts had a field day with that. The thing about political relationships, especially ones involving someone like Trump, is that they tend to swing between conflict and reunion. As one commentator put it, 1 minute they're fighting, the next minute they're back in love. It's a pattern that plays out constantly in Washington. Strong personalities clash over policy, over strategy, over who gets credit for what. Then circumstances shift, priorities realign, and suddenly yesterday's adversaries are today's allies. Whether that's pragmatism or just politics depends on your perspective. The earlier fallout that reporters referenced had to do with disagreements over certain legislative priorities, questions about spending, and some very public statements made about government efficiency. When you start questioning how taxpayer money flows through the system, you tend to make people uncomfortable. When you do it loudly, on a platform with hundreds of millions of users, you make them really uncomfortable. But analysts say something specific pushed the shift back toward cooperation. And it wasn't just personal reconciliation, it was global pressure. When the world gets chaotic, people make assumptions about motives. Right now, we're seeing economic uncertainty in multiple regions, border challenges that affect millions of families, and questions about America's long-term competitiveness. These aren't abstract policy debates, they're issues that touch people's daily lives. Some political analysts claim that a shared love for the country was what originally united them. Now, I can't speak to anyone's internal motivations, but I can tell you that when you're focused on solving problems at scale, whether that's getting humanity to Mars or making government work more efficiently, you end up crossing paths with people who share that sense of urgency. The commentary I've seen suggests that both, whatever the difference is, care about getting America back on track. Whether you believe that depends on whether you think large-scale ambition is genuine or just good branding. I'll let you decide. But reports say the real turning point happened much earlier than the state dinner. I didn't announce anything publicly, but others certainly did. According to multiple sources, the reconciliation actually began back in September at Charlie Kirk's memorial service. By October, some outlets were claiming that Trump was privately telling associates that the relationship was good and that he'd always liked the relationship. And if you understand how the world works, then you know that what gets reported is often what matters most. The interesting thing about quiet reconciliations is that they give both parties room to maneuver without the pressure of public expectation. When everything happens under the glare of cameras and microphones, every gesture gets analyzed to death. But when things unfold more naturally, behind the scenes, there's space for genuine dialogue. From there, speculation shifted to money, as it usually does in politics. Whenever money enters politics, the narrative gets louder, and in this case, the New York Times and other outlets published reports claiming there were significant donations to Republican super PACs. We're talking about multiple contributions in a single day, totaling tens of millions of dollars, according to their reporting. This is what media organizations reported based on federal filing data. But the narrative that took hold was that this donation effectively produced one of the largest individual political donors in recent history, with total contributions during the last election cycle reaching into the hundreds of millions. Whether those numbers are accurate, inflated, or missing context, I'll let you decide. What I can say is that when someone with resources decides to get involved in politics, the system has a way of both welcoming and scrutinizing that involvement in equal measure. The claims in the press were that written checks were sent to Trump's main super PAC, to the Senate Leadership Fund, and to the Congressional Leadership Fund, essentially covering all the major Republican campaign infrastructure. If true, that would represent a major force in the midterm landscape. But the most interesting part isn't the money itself, it's what people think the money is buying. The media seems convinced that the next digital political machine is being engineered, and maybe they're right to think that way. After all, technology has disrupted every industry it's touched: media, transportation, communication, commerce. So naturally, people assume politics is next. According to public reports, there are efforts underway to build advanced digital advertising networks, sophisticated voter targeting systems, and grassroots mobilization tools using platforms like X. The idea, as analysts describe it, is to bring Silicon Valley-level innovation to campaign strategy. Now, whether you think there is involvement, I'll leave that up to you to decide. But I will say this: technology doesn't care about your political affiliation. It simply amplifies efficiency. If you can reach the right people with the right message at the right time, you win. If you can't, you lose. That's true whether you're selling electric cars or selling ideas. The commentary I've seen suggests that Republicans have never had this kind of digital infrastructure before. Traditionally, Democrats have dominated the digital organizing space, building sophisticated voter databases and online fundraising operations over the past decade or more. But if these reports are accurate, that advantage may be shifting. And that brings us to something I keep seeing analysts talk about, a term people keep using to describe the political moment we're in. I've seen commentators describe something they call the tech-trad alliance. Interesting label. The idea, as they explain it, is that there's a growing alignment between Silicon Valley innovators on one side and conservative traditionalists on the other. At first glance, those groups seem like they'd have nothing in common. Tech entrepreneurs are known for disruption, for breaking old models, for moving fast. Traditionalists are known for preservation, for values, for continuity. But the analysis suggests there's significant overlap in worldview. Both groups, apparently, share a belief in cosmic order, the idea that the universe isn't random chaos, but something coherent and comprehensible. Both affirm that human beings have purpose and destiny, that life is meaningful rather than meaningless. Both emphasize production, economic flourishing, building things that last, and perhaps most importantly, both are concerned about declining birth rates around the world. This isn't just an abstract demographic trend, it's an existential question about the future of civilization. Analysts point out that religious conservatives tend to have significantly higher fertility rates than secular populations. In some states, the difference is dramatic, double the birth rate in religiously conservative areas compared to secular liberal regions. Whether this tech-trad alliance is real or just a convenient narrative, it's become a lens through which people interpret any involvement in politics. They see a bridge between two worlds that usually don't talk to each other, bringing resources and innovation to a coalition that's traditionally been outspent and outmaneuvered. But not everyone sees the story the same way, and that brings us to one of the more dramatic claims I've encountered. A congressman recently came with a statement of essentially being run out of D.C. for getting too close to exposing something the establishment didn't want exposed. According to that reporting, the issue centers on how money moves through NGOs and cycles back into the political system through what is known as dark money. Now, this is his statement, not mine, but it's worth understanding what he was getting at. The congressman described Washington not as a swamp, but as a sewer, something man-made, intentionally constructed to serve certain interests while keeping others out. His theory is that taxpayer money flows to these organizations, which then use it for political activities that ultimately benefit the people who authorized the funding in the first place. It's a closed loop, allegedly, and anyone who threatens to expose it gets pushed aside. He claimed that's what happened when leading the Department of Government Efficiency, that hundreds of thousands of federal positions were eliminated, a blueprint for cutting bureaucracy was established, and in doing so, getting too close to uncomfortable truths about how the system really works. Whether that's accurate or just political theater, that's up for you to decide. What I can say is that Washington has its own internal ecosystem, its own rules, its own way of protecting itself. Challenge that system openly, and you shouldn't be surprised when the system pushes back. The congressman's video struck a nerve because it articulated something a lot of people already suspected, that there are forces in government more interested in self-preservation than in serving the public. Whether it was a compelling choice or simply a decision to step back and refocus on my businesses, the story took on a life of its own. And all of these narratives, the reconciliation, the donations, the digital infrastructure, the dark money claims, they all collided as analysts started looking ahead to the next major political moment. People think the upcoming midterm elections will be the real battleground where all of this plays out. And based on what I've seen reported, they believe involvement could fundamentally change how those races unfold. Historically, midterms favor the party that's out of power. It's almost a given the president's party loses seats in Congress, sometimes dramatically. But analysts are now predicting that pattern might not hold this time. They point to several factors: unified messaging, significant financial resources, advanced digital targeting, and a base that's energized rather than demoralized. The reports suggest Republicans may have an unprecedented advantage, not because of any single factor, but because of how multiple elements are coming together at the same time. Money, technology, messaging, and grassroots energy, when those align, the political landscape can shift quickly. But for everyday Americans, especially those of you watching this, the question isn't really about political strategy or campaign finance. The question is, what does any of this mean for your daily life? When people analyze anyone's involvement in politics, they usually link it back to the issues voters care about most, and right now, those issues are pretty clear. Inflation is affecting how far your money goes at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in every part of your budget. Housing affordability is making it harder for your children and grandchildren to buy homes, to build equity, to achieve the kind of stability previous generations took for granted. Job markets are uncertain, with automation and global competition reshaping what kinds of work will exist in the coming decades. And immigration remains a flashpoint issue, with different communities experiencing very different impacts depending on where they live and what resources are available locally. Analysts say these issues will define whether any political unity succeeds or collapses, because at the end of the day, voters don't care about donor networks or digital infrastructure. They care about whether their lives are getting better or worse. And that brings us to the only question that really matters. What comes next? I've seen dozens of predictions, and most of them contradict each other. Some analysts say transformation will happen on how political campaigns operate going forward, bringing the kind of innovation to elections that I brought to electric vehicles and space travel. Others say the alliance with Trump will reshape conservative strategy for a generation, creating a new model that blends populism with technological optimism. Still others predict that Washington will push back harder than ever, that the establishment won't allow disruption without a fight, and that whatever progress gets made will be temporary at best. The truth is, this moment is still unfolding. Nobody knows for certain what the next chapter looks like, because it hasn't been written yet. And unlike a scripted drama, real-world politics involves millions of people making decisions that collectively shape outcomes. What I can tell you is that the stories people tell about this dinner, about donations, about digital operations, about dark money, they say more about the country than they say about me. Some analysts see opportunity in these developments. Some see disruption. Some see danger. Some see hope. At the end of the day, what actually happens next will depend on those millions of people, not just one dinner, one handshake, or one headline. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What do you think all these reports mean? Are analysts reading too much into it, or not enough? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep following these stories as they unfold, Tap like and subscribe. This conversation isn't ending anytime soon, and your voice matters in where it goes next.